If you're new, what you need to know about the upcoming pole shift. It happens every 12,000 years. It happens with an automatic reversal. Right now, the center of the Earth is spinning backwards. The sun and the center of the Earth is the same substance. They're both going to nova, like supernova. When that happens, the Earth is going to stop rotating 1,000 miles per hour, and all of that wind at 1,000 miles per hour is going to carry all the water, and it's going to account for the global flooding. Also, it's just going to carry mud everywhere. Plus, every volcano is going to be erupting at the same time. That pressure from the center of the Earth is going to do that. However, it's happening already, and we'll see a lot more volcanoes erupting until then. I've already shown you some of these ancient Mesopotamian cities unearthed deep within the Earth in Iraq, but a little recap. There was the tomb of Gilgamesh, and there was the one under the Mosul Dam that was been underwater for a ton of years, and the water finally lowered and they were able to unearth it. The one in Gursu, which was the ancient city of Sumer, and they unearthed all of these ancient Mesopotamian gods and goddesses and artifacts, proving that when this earth was buried is the time of ancient Mesopotamia, I mean at the late point. And when he unearthed this, they told him that he was lying, that he was wasting British government's time and money and trying to repress it immediately. But in my opinion, what's really going on is they're the ones lying, collectively as a government, like UN consensus, to cover up the tracks of the ancient civilization and the extraterrestrials that they're in alignment with that are really running the show behind the scenes. And this would explain where all the Sumerians went, lost civilization or the lost empire of Acadia, which actually they're investigating the lost empire of Acadia right now, and found a layer of burnt soil deep within the earth. They said there's no evidence of fire, it couldn't be explosion or invasion, and they're calling it flash thermal phenomenon. Why is it a phenomenon? Because they're looking at 5,000 years ago to explain it, and they can't make reason of it. If they were looking 12,000 years ago, it would make perfect sense. They say a layer of debris must have pummeled the earth. They said evidence suggests volcanic eruption and lightning, which is exactly right. The volcanoes are going to make a lot of lightning. That's going to be hurting our magnetosphere with all the water vapor and the dust. And also, our sun is going to be extremely hostile anyway, so it's going to just be an explosive combination, like prophecies will tell you about the lightning. 50 kilometers away, they find the same flash thermal phenomenon deep into the earth, and they said something must have pushed this layer of debris and ash down with incredible force. The way they knew it was lightning was there was little pieces of plastic found in the earth. Plastic wasn't even supposed to be invented till the 1900s. But plasma makes plastic. They even found plasma on somebody's skin that was hit by lightning. They also said there's evidence of shock wave phenomenon, which is also exactly what's going to happen from the center of the earth. A huge shock wave is going to go through our equator. They would just combine this with all the other evidence from 12,000 years ago. They could start putting the pieces together. They don't even know about the pole shift, and they're already getting all this evidence. The Indus Valley civilization is another lost civilization that just up and disappeared. They're now admitting to it being 9,000 years old, but this really means it's more than 12,000 years old because that's when the pole shift happened that wiped out all these mysteriously disappeared civilizations. Piles of skeletons excavated from deep within the earth, remains of the building, yet there's no remains of weapons or burning or anything like that. Everything is covered in radiation. And if you're new, this is all stuff from the pole shift that happens every 12,000 years. Tons of evidence on this, but also like NASA and CERN scientists just admitted to the 12,000 year cycle. Researchers believe it must have been a natural disaster, most likely flooding, which of course there's always some that are trying to analyze this as some kind of nuclear war because of the radiation from the supernova, which on their timeline should be impossible anyways. That's why most of the educated researchers say it's flooding, which it was in combination with some other stuff. And David Davenport, he excavated a site where he found 40 bodies piled up and rock that had turned to glass. That's from the lightning and the pole shift, from all the volcanoes erupting. Derinkuyu, or the other 200 cities in Cappadocia, those were all to survive the pole shift. There was an air filtration system that went down 18 levels, and each of these levels were something that different, like livestock breeding, winemaking and selling. There's temples, schools, like it was all very sophisticated. The entrances were blocked by a boulder that could only be opened from the inside. There's a water well that goes 180 feet into the earth. And then there's tunnels built from here to other ancient cities. Like there's a tunnel from Derinkuyu, 5-mile tunnel to Kamakli. I thought Derinkuyu was the largest underground city in Cappadocia. There's one called Nevashir that's 500,000 square miles and goes 370 feet into the ground. And then Midyar, 500 miles, from Derinkuyu, southeast Turkey, which is exactly where Göbekli Tepe is. Midyar is estimated 300% bigger than Derinkuyu. Nebashir was only estimated 30% bigger, so this place is huge. There's a story in Zoroastrianism, and Zoroastrianism actually predates Hinduism, and Hinduism is much, much older than we have been told. And there's a story explaining these structures. Zima, he's told to build structures, multi-level underground structures that are self-sustaining with water and plants, and to bring 2,000 couples, 4,000 people, and animals. Now, Zoroastrianism is Iran, and that borders Turkey. There's a lot of these structures. So I think what's going on is there's several of these Atlanteans being told this, and each is building a structure and bringing in these people. The Pueblo tell us about the Anasazi, who are the giants that built Chaco Canyon. And they also tell us how they went cannibal rapist at one point and they had to fight them. This is the same story that the Paiute tell us, and we found the bodies exactly where the Paiute said they would be. Just like the Mounds told us this exact same story, and we found those bodies as well. As did the Choctaw, Nakota, Navajo, Comanches, the Manta, like a bunch of Native American tribes tell us this exact same story about these giants that went violent that they had to kill. You hear about this in the Bible, like Hebrew text with the Watchers and the Anakim of the Bible. Don't let the timeline on the Bible throw you. This is all pre-12,000 years. The Paiute give us the real timeline that it happened 15,000 years ago. So this was 3,000 years between the pole shift. Like they didn't want to wait to the pole shift. They wanted them gone. But there was some remaining that were taken out in the pole shift. And you also see evidence of this in the Yucatan caves, where the giants were 13,000 years old, estimated. One of the mysteries to Chaco Canyon is, where did all the bodies go? And the answer is, they're not there because the pole shift, that's 1,000-mile-per-hour wind, 1,000-mile-per-hour water that carries all the bodies elsewhere, quite far. Turquoise, obsidian, copper bells that are not local to the region were found in the earth, like a lot of these ancient Mesopotamian cities or just ancient cities around the world. And, you know, copper, it's like one of the most ancient metals. We find it in the Pyramid of Giza. Obsidian, turquoise, very ancient, so just used by the ones inhabiting before the pole shift. And if you're thinking, oh, well, maybe they were imported, dozens of scarlet macaw remains were found inside the earth, and scarlet macaws are not local to the region. Like the nearest ones are the Gulf of Mexico, over 1,000 miles away. So that is how far the waters and the earth carry these things and bury them. Another Chaco Canyon mystery is, how did this huge flourishing civilization survive without any farming, with drought, without like regular rain and water? Like the nearest trees are 50 miles away and they're in the middle of the desert. Why would any civilization choose to live here? Let's look at some of the evidence around Chaco Canyon, all the gullies. It's evidence of huge bodies of water that have been ejected. Like you can see this ancient lake that was drained at 1,000 miles per second. It's from the reversal. And this is gullies. This is what's on Mars, and they admit this is evidence of oceans and lakes. Look at this one. Looks a lot like the Eloyan Dam, which they're trying to quote unquote dam. Like there was a dam and all the water just broke, and that's where all the water went. If it's on Google, it must be true. Doesn't explain all the other rivers and bodies of water that seem to just be ejected. So what happened is this shifted in the pole shift. 90 degrees was, south to Greenland, and it was once fertile with lakes and rivers and all that stuff, and then it shifted into this region, and all the water and sand from the ocean carried all that sand and made it a desert. That's how deserts are formed. It's from the pole shift. What you see of Chaco Canyon, that is actually only the top of the building. The entrance to the underworld, as the Hopi tell us, as the Pueblo tell us, these kivas are entrance to the underworld.
It's worth remembering that those majestic and towering ruins you see in Chaco Canyon today are the results of decades of restoration work and stabilization projects.
And anytime there's a lost civilization, it predates 12,000 years, and all the bodies went elsewhere and buried into the pole shift. That's why we're digging up so many of these ancient Mesopotamian cities, and we're not finding bodies with them. Relocated. Peru has all kinds of these mysterious buried structures. They're like a little more open about it, but still not too open. Like all governments answer to the same shadow. And of course, they're giving the same story as all these insane star forts, forts like Tarakaniv, that it was a defensive military structure. I mean, at first they said it was a ancient solar observatory, and then I think they realized, like, it's not quite enough of an explanation, and then they painted a false narrative of our history, as they always do. This place is out in the middle of nowhere, no water source, built on a granite hill in a difficult terrain, which built on a granite hill, it's possible that this granite hill is actually part of the structure that got buried in the pole shift. And they're taking the date back a little bit further. They're saying it's 600 BC, but that's still not even on the timeline for like Noah's flood. But Noah's flood was actually 12,000 years ago. It's actually the pole shift. So there's really just no way to explain the structure being completely buried in that time. I don't know why they have to be so stingy on these timeline days. Just make it more believable. Like, hey, guess what? We know the world existed before 5,000 years ago. But you know, that's prehistory, so no need to pay any attention to that because that doesn't affect your life, your world, because it doesn't affect your grade point average. Sometimes the narrative is so ridiculous, it's frustrating though comical. This is definitely one of those. They said that during the excavation, they found little ceramic warrior dolls to like back up that this was a military defense fortress, because that's how wars work, right? You know, get your little war dolls, and when the enemy comes, pew, pew. Like, this place is in the middle of nowhere. Like, wouldn't they want to invade their city, destroy everything they love? What, they're supposed to like find this place in the middle of the desert somehow just through like being psychic and then attack them there, and like there's dolls involved? Okay, got it. Like the Tarakaniv fortress out in the middle of nowhere, just covered in forest and trees, but they used it as a defense fortress. They like sent a memo to their enemies and like, can we just reschedule the location from destroying our city, and can you just, you know, trek through forest and trees and meet us here? Chanquilo is about 1,000 feet long. The walls are about 30 feet high. I mean, what's excavated, it's partially excavated. They found a rectangular room that goes right down the center that's designed to align and connect the winter and summer solstice. And then they have other structures in the area that also align to connect that same direction. Look at this structure that looks like a reptilian's or like a dragon's head with the neck and the back and everything. They say that Chanquilo was painted yellow and white, though I see a lot more than yellow in here. I see reds and oranges and pinks and just almost like a multicolor. If you haven't already noticed all these ancient cities being unearthed, buried deep in the earth, start paying attention. You can find them all over Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Bolivia, the Amazonian rainforest, New Mexico. They're all over. And start noticing things like fossilized whales in the Chilean desert, and you know, there's all kinds of fossilized fish rock in the middle of these deserts in Egypt and all over the Middle East, and fossilized shells and fish on the top of mountains. This is all the pole shift. There's a place in Casma, Peru called Cerro Sichin, and they believe it was buried from an avalanche coming down the hill 3000 BC, which, I mean, it was an avalanche of land and water. It just wasn't 3000 BC, 12,000 years ago. And they think it is a medical facility or a place of human sacrifice because of the carvings depicted. It depicts organs from the gastrointestinal tract with anatomical accuracy, open brain surgery, decapitated legs, arms, heads, all kinds of stuff. Oh yeah, and what seems to be a surgical saw. Casma has insane evidence of pole shift through the erosion and the gullies. They also have something called the Casma lines of Peru, like the Nazca lines of Peru, and it goes all the way to Pampa de Lama, another buried city. And you could see these from satellite years ago, but they all got covered with mango gardens. You can see how large this city is, this buried city, with all these little squares and triangles that seem to be like the tops of buildings, like one compressed city. See this stuff around quite a bit. And Casma is a pretty significant city. That's where Chanquilo Fortress is. Sichin Alto is in Casma, which is the largest building of this era, or in South America, of course, completely buried, partially excavated. And I believe that South America and Mexico were part of the same land before the pole shift. I mean, you can see now it's just hanging on by a thread. I think they separated. I mean, aside from Egypt, it's really like Peru and Mexico that you have these elongated skulls and these structures. Machu Picchu, a little more extravagant and impressive than the ancient stone structures in Mexico. It was a buried structure at 2,430 miles above sea level. It was excavated in 1902. I can't imagine how long it took to excavate this place. I wish there was pictures. Of course there's not. And this is in Cusco, to be clear, not Casma. And have you seen the Inca bridge that goes to it? It's like right on the edge of a cliff, like very vertical. Sacsayhuaman was excavated, which was not easy information to find, but I knew it had to be. And they're saying it was built in 30 years from 1431 to 1471. What do you think? And they said it was a military fortress, of course, like they do with everything. And they're changing it to Viracocha, the god that built it, deity. And they're changing it to like Viracocha. Absolutely absurd to say that humans, those days, their resources could possibly build it in 40 years. Like we couldn't even do it these days, like no way. And they said that when the Spanish left, they buried it with dirt. To like hide it, I don't know, save it for later for them, just absurd. And it was excavated in 1934. It's made from limestone from a quarry 32 kilometers away. And then they soften the stone and then they reharden it. And they make them all fit like puzzle pieces without any adhesive. And you find these stones, like the stones at Stonehenge are same softened and quarries in Egypt and all over the place. And there's ancient mythology, quote unquote mythology, that explain giants making these, softening the stone and rebuilding. And the locals will tell you that the giants built Sacsayhuaman, another structure the Spanish settlers destroyed, and I guess water eroded, completely stripped all the gold coating and buried with dirt in the 1500s. Okay, so it's pretty cool. It has a whole, chamber underneath that they call a tomb or a human sacrifice room, but that would have just got buried in the pole shift. Kind of reminds me of Sampiata in Bolivia, which that's Viracocha, same god. Same explanation for the human sacrifice. And then there's Piquiata, just this huge buried city, ruins. So frustrating not knowing what this stuff is. Like, just wish we could get honest excavations. This is only a kilometer away from Rumicoca, not Romancola. And that has a sophisticated hydraulic system. Herodotus is not the only man to have visited City of the Gods in Egypt, but gives us a pretty good description. City of the Gods is the Egyptian underworld beneath the floor. He describes it going from the Great Pyramid to the Sphinx to the Pyramid of Harawa, through the Pyramid of Memphis, and he describes it as 3,000 lavishly decorated chambers made of granite. It's also referred to as the Labyrinth of Harawa. In 2008, they found 2 levels beneath the Pyramid of Harawa, but they're not exploring the bottom level. Interesting. The first level is described exactly as Herodotus describes it. He describes it as 12 courts, 6 on the north, 6 on the south, with gates, and they're connecting to each other. He describes these 3,000 chambers beneath the ground. They're admirably adorned. That there's even a pyramid down there that has carvings on it, which is interesting because they found a pyramid under the ground of Tiwanaku. And he said that it looks like they're just all carved of one piece of stone, which sounds just like Derinkuyu and all these other cities under the ground of Cappadocia. In 1880, Flanders Petrie goes looking for City of the Gods, starts digging, starts excavating, and 5 meters in, he hits stone. And they unearthed a big structure, the top of it anyways, that was 1,000 feet by 800 feet, which they believed to be the base for City of the Gods. But of course, nothing happens, project gets shut down. But Flanders did make it inside of the Pyramid of Harawa and said there's a yellow crystal stone completely lining the walls of the pyramid. I bet you anything, this is that indestructible glass that the UFOs are made of, that the emerald tablets are made out of. They don't want anybody going inside or underneath the Pyramid of Harawa, so it's flooded and nobody can go inside, which I think there's 2 possibilities. Either it's not really flooded or they flooded it. Salam, he found underneath the Giza Plateau, an entire city that he described had temples and castles, craft producers, peasant cabins, all kinds of stuff. In 2008, a research team comes back with LiDAR scanning, and 12 meters in, they find artificial structures with chambers and hallways, but they are repressed and are not allowed to investigate any further. They said any discoveries have to go through the Ministry of Antiquities, which is government, and that's when they get repressed. And this started, news started to spread, and Zahi Hawass shut it down, as he always does. Zahi Hawass doesn't believe in LiDAR scanning. So they were threatened with sanctions, being banned from Egypt. Sound familiar? A lot like the team that found the copper handles in the Great Pyramid. The team leader said that NDAs had to be signed with the government and that they've spent years applying for re-excavation that have all gone unanswered or denied. But Zahi Hawass is just another pawn for the government. He has to be the face of this thing, and it takes a lot of heat. He got caught stealing copper wires from the pyramid, and interestingly, now he's actually being exiled. Well, supposedly for faking his identity, but this is right after he had hired 3 amateur German archaeologists to steal rock samples to actually date them and try to prove that they're older than they're saying they are. So, I don't know, maybe he's just, sick of the heat and wants people to know that, hey, it's not me, it's them. But yeah, he's being exiled for faking his identity, which they knew exactly, just because he wasn't really Egyptian, but they obviously, to get the position he had, they run every single thing about him, and they didn't care until he turned on them. And this is how interconnected all the governments are. They sent in these rock samples to Germany, and they were returned, and then the people were prosecuted. And they actually kind of ratted out Zahi Hawass and said that he was a part of it. The Hittite civilization was mentioned in the Old Testament over 50 times. And Hugo Winkler, a German archaeologist, he organized excavations in Turkey after finding some interesting tablets, which obviously had Greek writing. Remember, Greece and Turkey, so the Hittites were Greek. And archaeological records and the experts say that it validates the events of the Bible. Excavations were done between 1906 and 1912, these numbers. And they found a fortified tower, temples, statues, all kinds of stuff. And real quick, can we just take a look at this lion's face? Such a forgery, such a new addition. Look at the other one. Okay, that is what happens when you go through a pole shift. I don't know what they're trying to do here. No, it couldn't have been water erosion if this face is perfectly fine. So they knew this was the Hittite civilization. It was super obvious, but of course they're being repressed, denied, told they have no proof until they found undeniable proof. They found an entire archive room with over 10,000 of these clay tablets that were deciphered in 1950, and there was no doubt it was the Hittite civilization, to the point where it got into the media. And when when it gets to media, beyond government control, there's just too much evidence to get around it. And then of course they go into their desperate damage control attempts and say, oh no, completely different Hittite civilization, no connection to the Bible at all. When in the first place, obviously, even before they found the hardcore proof that it was Hittite, there was all of these things that led them to believe it was the Hittite civilization. It's kind of funny. For so long, they used religion as an excuse not to expose extraterrestrials. It was that and mass hysteria. And now they're using religion. Well, basically, religion exposes our extraterrestrial history. So it's a catch-22. Now they're trying to hide all this religious stuff. And the whole mass hysteria stuff is BS. We know. We don't know. We want to know. We know extraterrestrials are real, we're fine. Now we just want to know the full truth. These Dead Sea Scroll fragments that were found in 2019, excavations 2019 to 2020, made it to media, 2021, which is why people think it's 2021. But they were found in a cave, in a cliff, so high up that you can only get into the cave by bungeeing down. And of course, the entrance is all barred off to quote unquote keep out looters, which I've heard that excuse many times. I've heard many excuses, the bats. All the entrances to the Grand Canyon are barred off for bats. They found tons of tiny little fragments of these Dead Sea Scrolls that looked like they were just torn apart with incredible force. All of this dust and wind, it's all pushed up against the wall. They had to excavate it all out. And guess what was found with them? A basket that they're dating 10,500 years old, which obviously it's over 12,000 years old. They're terrible at carbon dating and lie anyways, but I'm surprised they're admitting it's that old. But they're still not admitting how old the scripture is, which just makes no sense. It was obviously in the basket, and then the force hit it out and just, tumbled it. But obviously the papyrus paper, whatever's on it, was a lot more fragile than this basket that held up. And if you believe they're radiocarbon dating on these scrolls or the Dead Sea Scrolls or biblical texts, anything like that, they have a system in place. No matter where the archaeological discovery is found, no matter where in the world, it is always going to go to a government facility labs that you might not even understand are government, universities. You know, the Smithsonian is government, and every country has their Smithsonian. They found some very ancient and unknown coins, which look like Greek hieroglyphs. Now, of course, Turkey was part of Greece, and the Jordanian desert just got covered from the pole shift with the sand from the ocean. They found the body of a little girl wrapped in fabric that they're dating back to 6,000 years. It makes no sense. They're trying to say the Dead Sea Scrolls are less than 2,000 years old. This body is 6,000 years old, and the basket is 10,500 years old. And so nobody could have gotten this cave. Like, at that time, it just was not possible. So this, to me, is proving that Rex Deus, or the star families, or the 12 priests of the Bible really did go around bearing all of this scripture to come up before the end times. Pole shift, whatever you want to call it, New World. And what script is revealed in these fragments they're piecing together? The 12 prophets of the Bible. I wonder if there's any connection to these 12 high priests or 12 elders, the Rex Deus star families that buried all this stuff. And this is 1 in 8 of these caves in this cliff. There's another one called Cave of Horrors where they found 40 dead bodies. I got a couple of videos sent to me about the Euphrates River drying up, and I wanted to contribute to some of that information, add some new information, and then also just correct a little of misinformation. So the city found under the Euphrates River was not found under the Euphrates River. It was found under the Tigris River, under the Mosul Dam. I covered that. I think it was my Ancient Mesopotamian Cities Unearthed video. And then the other big news was the artificial cave found underneath, which is amazing. Glad that I was sent that because I was able to find a lot more ancient caves underneath. And now knowing that Turkey was really Greece, it's even cooler. I'll get into the other caves in a minute, but first of all, I don't think this man-made artificial cave was a prison like it's being titled. First of all, at least 20 to 30 feet has been buried. So those quote-unquote prison bars would be way too high to be prison bars. And I think it's probably some kind of drainage system, since all the star forts had drainage systems. And I mean, it's kind of funny because, you know, if you remember the 7 angels of the apocalypse, the 4th angel, I believe it was, says that there's 4 angels bound under the Euphrates River that are going to be released and kill 1/3 of the population. So people are taking this very literal, that, you know, these 4 angels are actually, this was their prison. They're like under there imprisoned, and they're going to actually like be physical angels that are kill everybody. I already said that I think it's volcanoes, 4 of them that are going to go off at once and then set off the rest. The end times or the apocalypse is the pole shift, if you don't know that. Like, every volcano is going to be erupting. So there's the Euphrates volcanic field. Now, scientists have discovered how, they've been very confused about how there's been volcanoes forming and volcanic activity in Anatolia so far away from the tectonic plates. Now they discovered this volcanic activity is coming from over 1,000 miles away. And now they found evidence of a hot plume of magma flowing from East Africa. Remember the giant blob under East Africa? Like last recorded was like the size of Australia, but growing, and has fingers, and those fingers are growing. Now this is the length of Africa, through the Red Sea, through the Indian Ocean, through southern Mozambique. And if you're thinking, sucks being them, like thank God I'm on the other side of the earth. Nope. There's 2 gigantic plumes the same size directly on opposite sides of the earth, the other under the Pacific Ocean, which recently cracked the bottom of the Pacific Ocean in half and zippered its way right into the Gulf of California. And they even think it's going to make Europe and North America merge. Between the Euphrates volcanic field, which has 11 volcanoes, or the Anatolian Plateau, or even Mount Ararat, who knows where these 4 are going to start, but once they do, it's going to be a domino effect, and just the land will break up, earthquakes like crazy, lightning everywhere, frying everything, you know, the sulfur, the vapor, all that stuff is just gonna set it all off. Mount Ararat, the mountain that, you know, Noah's Ark supposedly settled on, is mentioned in the Bible as being rested by the Euphrates River. And Mount Ararat is Turkey's largest, tallest volcano, and it also has a twin volcano. I don't think that they really think these artificial caves are really prisons. I think they know exactly what they are, especially since they're blocking off any entrances that can be entered. Surprise, shocker, like they always do. Remember, this used to be Greece, so there's probably some proof of that inside. So let's explore these artificial caves along the Euphrates River. 2013, a cave research group, they started exploring along southeastern Turkey along the Euphrates River. So this is just one little section of the Euphrates River in 2013. And if they allowed any more research after this, I'm sure we found a lot more. In this region, the river is flowing through Eocene limestone, and there's hundreds of dwellings carved into these soft limestone walls. There's tens of these artificial caves, and Rumkale, which Rumkale was mentioned in ancient Assyrian scripts, again proving that Sumerian tablets, all these ancient Akkadian Sumerian scripts are pre-12,000 years. They found underground churches in these caves, and they did a survey where GPS marked all these structures, and they were recorded and photographed. At this point in 2013, 73 artificial caves were found in 64 different locations. 3 of them were churches, and 33 of them have been surveyed and mapped. 33, 3, those numbers. Oh, and guess when experts think that the Euphrates River will dry up? 2040. Interesting number. I've recently found like proof that this biblical scripture is pre-12,000 years. So really, the Euphrates River, and this is not the only text that is predicted that it's going to dry up in this apocalypse, but this was predicted pre-12,000 years, and even if you want to say it's 3,000 years ago, either way, this is knowledge that should be impossible to know at the time. And I'm realizing that they control all of our water. They are making it dry up. This huge body of water is found inside of Earth. They estimate 4 times our oceans. Our ancient ancestors tell us that these waters connect. Like anybody that knows anything about UFOs know that they travel out of the ocean. And, you know, we were trying to explain our oceans with comet, like a comet hit, and that's how we got our oceans until we found water inside the Earth. Mystery solved of where the water in the Great Lakes and this everlasting flow of Niagara Falls water involved in it. And it just happens to be dated to 12,000 years ago. The Bosda Caverns are in Turkey, aka Greece before the pole shift. And, you know, they're said to be an artificial cave system. You can see this is another buried structure. You can see the top. There's, you know, all these little squares we keep seeing in these artificial structures. And, you know, it's buried 33 feet. You can see this is all just carved, machine carved out of the limestone rock. And there's those long flat swipes. And then there's these little more kind of like almost chiseled looks, which you can find at Petra, which is another structure carved right out of the rock. You can find it in India, China, actually 18 other structures you can find them. And you can see this other cave that's almost identical in Turkey. Of course, it's gated off, the entrance. This place is huge, rooms with 50-foot ceilings. Cave goes 3,273 feet into the ground. Kayseri, Turkey, they found this cave city. It's 260 feet long. It has 52 chambers, but they're all, it's not like vertical into the ground like Darren Kuyu. It's all horizontal, has these openings. So it wasn't designed to survive the pole shift. And this is far from the only city that they've found in Kayseri. All this stuff is Kayseri I'm going to mention. 33 cities like this, 46 churches, all like rock cut churches, 10 tin mines, like ancient tin mines within these caves, 26 rock-cut Roman-style graves, and 5 cliff dwellings. Pretty much every rock dwelling, underground rock city that I've seen all has these supernova burns, has tons of like, you know, pole shift remains, everything's all broken and piled up, and dirt and debris. Even like the tops of Darren, you can see people were living in those with little openings to let in, you know, light and air and stuff like that. Same with just all around Cappadocia, like all these cities have these little openings all around Turkey, really. I'm realizing I don't know how to pronounce half the stuff and I don't have time to look, so I'll just put it on the screen. They call this a castle. It's an insane rock cliff dwelling with all these little openings all the way to the top. And these are all over Turkey. And you'll notice they call a lot of these tombs, most of these tombs, they're not really tombs. It's just because they got buried from the pole shift. And the Euphrates River is not the only one to dry up and reveal these cliff dwellings, like Von Dam. Also the cliff dwellings that the New Dead Sea Scrolls were found, the Cave of Horrors, those 8, which are obviously all connected. And if you haven't seen the Nevashir province, insane. Definitely going at some point. And these things are all over the Middle East, all over Iraq, ton in Iran, but I won't show you this one. Does this look familiar? And you can tell, like, it's all elevated behind it. There's a whole, like, inner earth city. They say these houses are only 2 stories and there's nothing underneath, but obviously that's BS, as the pole shift buries 33 feet, so there had to be more under there. Afghanistan, and this one had 2 giant Buddha statues carved into it, which they were the biggest Buddha statues ever. Of course, the Afghani government destroyed them. They're all over Europe, lots in Italy and Greece. They're in Africa, they're all over Asia, like Russia, China, Japan. I mean, basically they're everywhere. We even have them here: Bandelier, Mesa Verde, Grand Canyon, huge unearthed system in the Grand Canyon. We just block it all off and make excuses as to why you can't go near. And Turkey's the only place that actually is excavating underneath and figuring out what's going on. So really, these could just be everywhere buried. The Hopi said that one day scientists came, government scientists obviously, and said, we want to take these tablets, take them to a scientific laboratory and determine how old they are. The Hopi said, well, we know how old they are. I said, well, let's just confirm it. So they took them. They said they were at least 10,000 years old, possibly 50,000 years old. That's how terrible our radiocarbon dating is with stone, but at least 10,000, that means at least 12,000 years old. That means between the 12,000 year and the 48,000 years, somewhere in that window. The Hopi said that they began to send people to the mountains to have visions on how to survive this thing. At that time, there was 100,000 cities in the Mississippi Valley alone. That this was called the Mound civilization. And that these mounds are still here, some are still here today, in Mississippi and Ohio, and they're tourist attractions. At Cahokia Mound, there's 80 surviving mounds. Only 1% has been excavated. Kind of strange. It's only 80 mounds, like why stop at 1%? There's been chapels and cemeteries found inside. Monk's Mound, the mound of Cahokia, it's 1,000 feet long, 700 feet wide, 100 feet tall. When they did excavations, they found the chapels, the cemeteries, but they thought it was just going to be dirt, and there's a smaller stone pyramidal structure underneath that's just covered in dirt and grass. You ever notice all of these mounds are, everyone is covered in dirt and grass? How do you get rid of a bunch of pyramidal stone structures and explain them? Just throw a little dirt and grass on them. And these mounds are where these giant skeletons have disappeared from. And Poverty Point, this reminds me almost of, these structures we're finding in the Amazonian rainforests or the Eye of the Sahara. So pre-12,000 years. New evidence suggests that Monk's Mound was underwater, to the point where they think it was just like always underwater, living underwater. They think it was built beneath the floodplain of the Mississippi and Illinois River. They said coming upon this time, grandchildren will not have time for their grandparents. Parents won't have time for their children. That time is going to speed up faster and faster, which I've definitely noticed. It said in this time where time is speeding up faster, try to slow yourself down. They said when the house is in the sky, the Great Spirit is going to shake the earth a 3rd time, and the one that brought that gourd of ashes upon them is going to drop. And I've mentioned before somewhere in one of their prophecies, it says the great inhabitable house falls to earth. So this is definitely some kind of astral body supporting life. There's going to be a time where this earth will rise up and purify itself. That this is going to be announced by 16 great ones to the west of this land, which the west coast is where the Ring of Fire is, the volcanic Ring of Fire. So it's very possible that just immediately the announcement is going to be 16 of these big volcanoes erupting at the same time. The biggest mound I've found, meaning ancient stone structure that they throw a little dirt and grass on and try to cover up, is Mount Teotihuacan in Mexico. In 1891, an ancient map was found in a monastery revealing that there was a pyramid in the exact location of Mount Teotihuacan. And the map depicts a sacred cave underneath the pyramid. Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History refused to do any excavations, refused to even speak about it, completely denied that there's any possibility that this pyramid on the map, this exact location, is the mountain, or the mountain is the pyramid. They said that this mountain was in dire need of a drainage system, which is interesting because mountains have drainage systems. Drainage systems are the result of the pole shift. Mountains are a result of the pole shift. So if this is a natural mountain, why does it need a drainage system? Why doesn't it have the evidence of real mountains? Because it's not a real mountain. And neither are the pyramids in Antarctica, which are not too large to be pyramids, and neither is the pyramid of Cholula, which was thought to be a mountain or a huge hill for centuries. It wasn't even excavated till 1931. Excavations went on till 1970, like 40 years later, and it's barely even excavated. That's how big it is, and it's 7,500 feet above sea level. Same as Nimrod. The fact that they excavated Cholula and they're refusing to excavate Mount Teotihuacan or even acknowledge that it's a pyramid, even though it was like found on ancient maps as a pyramid, means there's something very significant underneath that they don't want to expose. And there's the Bosnian pyramids, then the ones on Faroe Island, then more in Java, Indonesia, another in Pakistan. Let me know if you in the comments if you have any more. Under the Pyramid of the Moon at City of the Gods, there's been 11 subterranean stone temples underground, tunnels, road, all mapped out under there. And then in Guatemala, 500 miles of tunnel has been found under the Pyramid of Tikal. And almost an exact account from the ancient Egyptians. They describe this 3,000 lavishly decorated chambers underground to be called City of the Gods. Just like City of the Gods in Teotihuacan, where these tunnels have been found under the Pyramid of the Moon. And they describe these tunnels going from the pyramids to the Sphinx, and Greek historian Herodotus, he backed this up. He not only went in the tunnel system, went into the inner earth, lavishly decorated chambers, which he said there was 12 entrances. There's 12 families of the Anunnaki, of the original Atlanteans. And he also saw the Hall of Records under the Sphinx Paw. Almost 500 years later, Greek historian Strabo, he also confirmed this, said the same thing. And now, under the Giza Plateau, there's been discovered an endless system of man-made roads and tunnels. These natural caverns and subterranean rivers underground have been continually discovered since 1978. And ancient Egypt, Giza, was called Rastal, which translates to mouth of the passages. Okay, so the pole shift buries 33 feet every 12,000 years. All these structures were unearthing 33 feet, yet we are finding dinosaur fossils all over the surface of the earth. There's lots of mythology about these sea monsters roaming the land, terrorizing people, terrorizing the land, or, being rescued by them. Andromeda was rescued by Perseus from a sea monster on the land. Hercules saved Troy from one of these sea monsters. Poseidon sent one of these to destroy a kingdom on land, and so on. This winged dinosaur fossil has been found, by far not the only one, but it's 4 feet long. It's not full grown, they said probably like 6 feet. And a lot of these ancient paintings, you see these smaller dragons. They say this is cousin to the velociraptor, which I'm pretty sure they say all the winged dinosaurs being found are cousins to the velociraptor. The velociraptor has its little arms connected to its wings, which we see this in ancient depictions as well. Like I said, different breeds of them. And the velociraptor is also said to look nothing like it's depicted, which I'm getting a lot. And it was 66 feet long, 16 feet tall, and 3-toed, which makes cigarilla click. Those toes at the bottom, which they call like lion's feet or something like that, of course it would be dragon's feet. I noticed when I found that Dracorix, that clearly dragon skull, it didn't have a body. Then I searched it again and it had a body that was like bullshit. I started looking at these exhibits and they're primarily all bullshit. Like it seems like there's almost no real actual dinosaur bones in it. And I search and that never is like a whole dinosaur found. It's usually a couple pieces, a piece, and then they build on it. And I also found articles to back that up. Large teams of scientists, technicians, they just, take a piece that they found and then just design the whole thing. The Brontosaurus rex was the first dinosaur ever to be put in a museum exhibit, and that's exactly what they did. Somebody speaking firsthand that was there, they just decided, okay, let's make it 70 feet. Let's put it in this shape. And then they give a misrepresentation of a lot of these. The Spinosaurus is the largest dinosaur to ever be found, and it is completely inaccurately depicted, and it turns out it's actually an aquatic animal and has a crocodile-like snout. And a ton of these dinosaurs actually had feathers. There's one called the Quetzalcoatlus. Remember, Quetzalcoatl is the Mayan flying serpent or dragon. And they just found a few bones and whatever, and then they design it with this beak. And then we find a fossil of it, and look at this. It's so clearly edited around the head. They took lighter clay and gave it a beak. It's just never ceases to amaze me how sloppy they are with their cover-ups. Not that some of these couldn't have beaks. I mean, I'm sure it definitely did. There were actually griffins with beaks. And Pangaea mythology, Tartarian mythology, Greek mythology all have these griffins. And I actually just said that wrong. It's actually, I realized, Pangaea. Gaia was the first goddess, the earth goddess, and this goes all the way back to Pangaean mythology. It's not just Greek mythology. Pangaean, Tartarian, ancient Greek mythology, they all have these griffins, dinosaurs, sea monsters, and giants, which is giants, so Tartarians, Atlanteans, all that stuff.
Now to the story of a sea monster with 130 razor-sharp teeth, the biting force of a T-Rex, and a skull measuring 2 meters. It might sound like the stuff of legend, but this creature really did exist around 75 million years ago, and it was called pliosaur. And a fossil of its enormous jaws has been now found off Dorset's Jurassic coast.
Okay. Oh, wow.
There you go.
It's huge.
Unveiling a Jurassic sea monster.